June 6, 1944, the U.S. Armed Forces stormed Omaha Beach at Normandy. The men got out of little plywood boats and just got cut down like grass. Just got cut down like grass. Just got cut down like grass. So, can you imagine the bravery that it took? You're coming up on a beach in your little plywood boat, no protection. You're supposed to run onto the beach where there's landmines and barbed wire and great big chunks of steel dropped on the beach to keep any tanks or anything from rolling off of your boat. You know, you're going uphill, running towards concrete turrets with men that have machine guns, and everyone around you is just getting plowed down. You hear beep, zip, zip, zip. I got fired at years ago because a guy from work and I put a couple of motorcycles in my pickup truck, and we went out to Boyd's, Maryland, where they were working on clearing some land away for high tension wires. And it was like a perfect motocross situation. All the trees and everything had been cleared away, and it was a nice big hill. And man, we motocrossed to the top and then motocrossed back down. About 5 in the afternoon, we heard this pop, and then we heard something through the trees that were left around us. Then in the distance, pop, and then I told the guy, I said, Jimmy, somebody is firing at us. They're telling us, to leave. And so it was actually my company pickup truck, really nice truck. It was a 78 Ford pickup truck, red on red. And yeah, nice pickup truck. And what had happened was they got it from my boss, Herbert McNean. They called him Herbert McNasty, rather. And Herbert got his nose in an uproar, and he said he wasn't going to drive a pickup. The reason the company got him a pickup was he had wrecked 2 company cars before that, wrapped them around trees and such. He had cancer, and he was a heavy drinker because of the agony that he was in. Poor man. He was one of the soldiers that they sent out in the 50s out into the desert. They exploded a nuclear bomb out in the desert. And then they had the men rush in with their rifles, to see how long they would live amongst the radiation. And they did surprisingly well, except for the fact that like 30 years later, they started to die off from thyroid cancer and all this other stuff like my boss had. So he used to stay up all night drinking and then wreck his car. So he decided to give me the company pickup truck and take my beautiful new Ford LTD and use that as his car. And I was very upscale back then. I had the Ford LTD. I didn't tell my parents I was living in it. I never tipped my hand. But I did have a company phone in the car. It was the old type where you press the handset in and you go Washington, WAL 767 Washington. And then you get the operator and she connects your call. So for a garbage collector. So in any case, Herb had my car, I had his pickup. And when they started to fire on us, I panicked and it was starting to get dark. I told Jimmy, I said, let's get the motorcycles in the pickup truck, get the heck out of here. And the cool thing was up on the mountain was a well, and the well was overflowing and it had moss on top of it and crayfish. Whenever you see crayfish, the water is clean enough to drink because crayfish have to have a real clean environment to live. They look like little lobsters and they flick along in the water. So I dipped my hand in and drank the water, sweetest, best tasting, heavenly water I'd ever had in my life. Cool and refreshing. And they were going to plow that thing under and put up a utility pole. So we put the motorcycles in the pickup truck. And man, I blasted down off of that mountain. Came across a creek. And when I bounced into the creek, the truck bounced on a rock and it crushed the exhaust system and tore it off of the truck. What's up, Margot? How are you? So I came down the rest of the mountain in the pickup truck and just tore the exhaust system clean off the brand new 1978 pickup truck. And so we didn't get shot, was the good news. I mean, I blasted right through a barbed wire fence, just like the Dukes of Hazzard with my pickup truck and the motorcycles. Blasted through this barbed wire fence at the bottom and ran over top of the no trespassing sign, and away we went, you know, with the headlights all crooked on the truck and the grill knocked out and the muffler broken off. And so I called my boss and I said, hey, Mr. McMurray, I got bad news for you. I wrecked your pickup truck. I'll have it fixed. So don't get upset. I wrecked your pickup truck. It's not really that bad, but I'll get it fixed. He said, well, hey, baby, I got bad news. I just wrecked your brand new Ford LTD. So he wrecked my brand new Ford LTD, and I wrecked his pickup truck. And we both had a laugh about it. The LTD had a rough life because it was a brand new 78 Ford LTD, and it had these great big steel bumpers on it, cattle catchers, and it stood about a good foot off the ground. And there was a guy that worked at the gas station that I happened to have knocked down with the garbage truck, Norris Brothers Amico. I was filling my garbage truck up, and Mr. Norris would come out and he would gripe about me not chalking the wheels of the truck up. I was like, yeah, go back inside. It'll be okay, old man. He was like 90 years old, had twin hearing aids. And yeah, so he went back inside the gas station grumbling. And it was a long, slight hill, just the slightest hill, like maybe a 5% grade, 7% at most. And I'm fueling the truck up, and all of a sudden the hose pulls out of the tank of the truck. And in my dumb mind, I said, the hose is getting shorter. And the hose wasn't getting shorter. The truck had decided to start moving. And it moved ever so slightly, like that outer limits where the truck is stuck in time and the little girl is riding the tricycle behind it, and the mother and the father have to go back in time in the T-Bird convertible and rig a system up for the truck to stop before it runs over their little girl. And there's this scary time monster, scared the crap out of me. I could watch Twilight Zone, but Outer Limits was too far from me. Too scary. And the time monster says he's trying to trap the family in time so he can get out of the time trap. Very scary episode. So in any case, the truck really starts to get a good run going. And I'm running next to it, and I was pretty powerful back then. I pick up this great big square chunk of steel, and I throw it under the tires to try and stop the truck. The truck just laughed at me and rolled right over top of it. So I ran next to the cab and I hopped in with my behind up in the air, and I'm trying to reach the shifter and put the automatic shifter into reverse. The parking brake was on. So I was trying to put the shifter into reverse. Wouldn't have done any good anyway, because I would have had to put it in reverse and then step on the gas to engage the transmission to slow the truck down. So the truck hit the gas station just like a bull with those two forks that picked up the dumpster. And the forks went under the roof, and the truck hit the door, the garage door, and knocked it onto a brand new Buick Centurion convertible that Mr. Norris was working on. And that was by the grace of God too, because it knocked him into the middle of the car, and then the door fell on top of the convertible, and then all the cinder blocks and bricks and roof fell on top of that. So the door kept old man Norris from getting wiped out. His son and his shop steward saw the truck coming. They were at the window, and slow motion, they were like, whoa, like that. And I hit that gas station, and the truck drove through half that gas station, knocking it down. And so I climbed out of the truck, looking at the devastation. My boss came around the corner. I said, very politely, I said, Mr. McMurray, you'll never guess what happened. So he was always like Telly Savalle with the lollipop. Hey, baby. Back the truck up, check for survivors, adjust the brakes, go pull you out, in that order. So I got in the truck and put it in reverse and carefully backed it up. I went into what was left of the gas station to check for survivors. And see, Mr. Norris was deaf as a rock, so he didn't hear anything. He just looked stunned as we picked the door off the convertible and threw all the bricks off of the door and the cinder block. He was like stunned, lying in this new convertible. And he was okay. Not a scratch on him. Glory to God, man. So I didn't know how to adjust brakes on the truck, but I did it. I got a wrench and a hammer and some lubricating oil and lubed the little nuts up and tightened them up and tapped everything with the hammer. Got in the truck, the brakes were squeaky tight. So I went and pulled my route, came back, and the Amoco was all boarded up with plywood. And so rather than rescue the Amoco, they decided to finish knocking it down, and they put Rockville Medical Center there. So that was my first accomplishment as a 15-year-old boy, was to get a medical center, be responsible for a medical center being put in Rockville, Maryland. You might say 15. Yes. I was 15 when I started driving the garbage truck. Nobody asked me about a license or anything. So I was turning 16, and for some reason, I guess they audited the company to find out our age and license and all that. Two of us didn't have the right license. So we take the truck to the DMV on Goody Drive near the old dump. And the police officer comes out, and there were 3 officers, and they drew straws to see which officer would have to ride the garbage truck to give me the test. So he comes out, and he looks like Sheriff Buford T. Justice off of Smokey and the Bandit. You here for your license, boy? Yes, sir. How'd you get the truck up here, boy? I drove it, sir. You drove it, you don't have a license. You know you're not supposed to drive the truck, boy. Get your boss up here. So the boss comes, and he smooths things over with a handshake, a special handshake. And the officer agrees to give me the test. So in a front end truck, you don't have a helper. So I had my clean out shovel on the right side. I took the clean out shovel and threw it in back of the truck. And the officer hopped in, and he looks at me and he goes, "Drive, boy. Drive, boy." And so the other officers are laughing at him because the truck wasn't washed and it smelled, and, it was horrible, just horrible condition. And back then, they didn't do an inspection of anything, no walk around or anything. He hopped in the cab. Drive, boy. So I drive all through Rockville, past the Amoco station that I had knocked down, over a bridge that wasn't strong enough for the truck, the Veers Mill 28 bridge, which wasn't supposed to have that big a truck on it. Back out to 28, left turn to Goody Drive and back to the DMV. The bridge was too narrow for the truck, so I had to hug the sidewalk, so the tires were rubbing the curb and making the truck bounce as it was trying to grab the steering wheel out of my hand, because I was trying not to go over the yellow line. So the police officer looks at me and he says, 8 points for leaking oil. So he passed me minus 8 points for leaking oil. So he gets out of the truck and he's walking towards the other officers, and they start to howl. And he said, what are you men laughing at? What's wrong? What are you laughing at? They said, JD, check the back of your pants. Boy scared you so bad you crapped yourself. And what had happened was the oil and the garbage dirt and everything from the seat had ruined this man's pants. And all the back of his tan pants had this great big oil and garbage stain on his butt. And it looked like he crapped himself because it was bits of dirt and hair, and they just howled at the guy. And I said, oh my God, sir. I said, I'll pay for the dry cleaning. I'll clean the pants myself. I'll buy you. Get out of here. Get out. I don't ever want to see you again. So I got in the truck and took off while the getting was good with my new license. And man, I ran over everything, tore down wires, ran down mailboxes. I went into Bethesda and I dumped Duron paints. And I was packing the truck early in the morning. And the franchise owner of the Roy Rogers had his brand spanky new jet black Lincoln Continental out front. And when I packed the truck, it squirted all of the paint from Duron paints all over the side of the Lincoln Continental. Orange and blue and red and white paint went all over the Lincoln. So I got the bright idea to try and wipe the paint off of the Lincoln with a dumpster sign. Says I'm wiping the paint started to set up. And there was this Lincoln, jet black, brand new Lincoln with 17 kinds of paint all over it. And a sign stuck to the side, Blue Ribbon Refuse. No mistaking what had happened to the car. Will had struck again. And my boss, the cancer got worse with him. And he said, everybody back then was boy, you've hit everything except the lottery. And I told him, I said, Mr. McMurray, one day I'm going to hit that too. But eventually I got better driving the truck. A few little incidents here and there. The other kid drove a truck into a lake because the brakes failed and he bailed out. And our other truck went into a lake. A third kid was a dope head, and he left the arms up on the truck and drove it under Rockville Mall and decimated the truck and the breezeway for the mall, knocked the brick breezeway down. So finally one day, Finally, one day, McMurray came in and he said, "We're out of business. We can't get insurance for the trucks." Oh, I remember what it was. We had this British guy, Barry, and he drove the roll-off truck. And the roll-off truck had like a 7 or 8 foot nose on it. Auto car. Beautiful truck. I drove it a couple of times. And man, you gotta be a truck driver to drive that thing. And so he went into Glenmont Shopping Center to get a long beer in a paper bag. And he comes out drinking a beer, walks around the back of the truck, and some unsuspecting person had parked a Fiat Bertone in front of the auto car. Now, Fiat Bertone is this car. It looks like it's been mushed by a car crusher. It's like 3 feet off the ground at most. Looks like a little kiddie car. So Barry gets into the auto car drinking his beer, puts the auto car in gear, and the auto car just doesn't seem to have the pickup and get up and go that it normally does. So he puts it in a lower gear and he's driving along the parking lot with this Fiat Bertone crushed underneath the auto car. And people are waving at him and pointing, "Stop, stop, you got a car underneath your truck." And Barry is blowing the air horn and waving at the people. He gets all the way out to the road to make a turn, and the auto car won't turn because he can't cut the wheels because of the car underneath the truck. And thank God nobody was in the car. BFI had a similar accident, and there were 4 owners of a VW dealership, and that closed them down for a while because there were 4 men in this little VW that got crushed by one of their trucks. But we were fortunate. So Herb comes in, he says, "We're out of business, can't get insurance." Yeah. So I had all that under my belts at the ripe old age of 16. I worked a job since I was 14 in a gas station, making $9 a day. Not $9 an hour, $9 a day. And there were men raising families on that money. And then I got an offer to work on a garbage truck for $20 a day. I didn't realize it was from dark to dark. I started to bulk up working on the garbage truck. My father put me out at 15, locked the door. They went out of the country because he was afraid that I would kick his ass someday for using me like a punching bag and pushing me down the basement stairs and or trying to use me for an ashtray to put his cigarette out on. So in any case, it never occurred to me to get a van with a bed. I always drove a very nice, expensive car. And the one kid from the gas station, Huber, who was very hairy, we called him Puber because he was so hairy, German guy, had a 62 Corvette Stingray in gray primer. And he would park it about 6 inches. Hey, Justin. Yeah, I'm hanging in there. He would park it like 6 inches from the back of my car. And every day I would come in and he wouldn't move the Corvette. he would say, come on back, stop, go forward, stop. And I would have to inch the LTD out of the parking space, not hitting the Corvette. So one day it was like 104 degrees out and I was fed up. I was fed up with everything. And the devil got hold of me. And Huber's behind the LTD. And I put it in reverse with my foot on the brake. And then I pushed the gas pedal down like halfway. And the LTD was just straining like, come on, Will, let me go. I know I'm on board. I know what you're going to do. Let me go get him. So, yeah. So, in any case, it was beautiful and it was liberating. I let up off of the brake and the LTD just majestically rose to the occasion and drifted back and on top of the hood of the Corvette with the gas tank sitting on the hood of the Corvette and Puber screaming his lungs out and the back wheels of the LTD just spinning in the air. And so, let me get this taken care of. I don't know why. It amazes me how things fight me. It amazes me how things fight me. So, Huber comes over and he grabs the door of the car open and yanks me down on the ground by the collar. Bam, 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 bam. 5 times right in the face. And I told him, I said, well, that was an accident, sir. You know, we both knew it wasn't. I said, that was an accident. I said, I'll tell you what, I won't call the cops for assault and battery, you know, and you don't call the cops for me accidentally sliding up on top of your Corvette. So that's what we did. We got the LTD off the Corvette, and the Corvette really wasn't hurt. It had just mushed down underneath the LTD. But I'll tell you, the next day, no more bully. When I came in, the Corvette was parked all the way across from the car lot, from the parking. Because Huber knew the little trash boy wasn't going to take any more of his crap. So, yeah, like I said, that was the grand old age of 16. I had wanted to be a doctor. But it didn't occur to me when my father put me out to go next door to the very nice lady and ask if I could rent her basement. I had money because I worked since I was 8 years old, cutting grass and this, that, and the other. I worked for a guy who worked for the government. He was a pedophile. He would go overseas to Bangkok and Thailand to get with little boys. I cut his grass. And then he said I would make more money inside, working inside the house. And he had a dog that he let crap all over the floors. And I would come in and the fleas would just eat you up. So he would spray my legs with DEET. And one of my assignments was to take a kitchen spatula and scrape the dog crap off the floors and clean the floors. And he had very expensive silverware that he wanted polished and a very expensive silk and jade fan room divider. But no screens in the windows. So, and no air conditioning. So he sat there with the windows open in his underwear and a open dress shirt at a TV tray reading the newspaper. And he said, "Get me a beer, boy, and while you're at it, get one for yourself if you want." I didn't realize I was being set up. But I was like, I'm stomping with the big dogs now. 11-year-old kid drinking beer and bringing home $50, $60. There back then, we're talking over half a century ago, people made and working in restaurants and offices and stuff, secretaries and waitresses, it took a week to make $50 or $60. Gas was 19 cents a gallon. Premium gas was 26. So $50 or $60 was big money. And my mother was no fool. She was like, "Where are you getting all this money for cutting grass?" So, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful. I went to school, and the crossing guard would take all the little boys to the candy store. I told my mother about Mr. Austin, and Mr. Austin looked like Captain Kangaroo, kind of a unisex haircut. You couldn't tell really if it was a man or a woman. And my mother said, "Only the boys," like that. I was much younger then. I was like 7. And I went to a listening camp when I was 13. And one of the camp counselors was the same way. See, back then they didn't talk about that stuff. You didn't even know that stuff went on. But looking through my camp album, I noticed Steve, every picture of Steve, he had 2 boys under the right arm, 2 boys under the left. And he would always fall on a couch or a bed with 4 boys and tussle with them. And we were told to keep our mouths shut. Don't say anything unless you're asked to. Even if you said yes, sir, when you weren't told to, they gave you empty buckets out in the hot sun, and you're holding these buckets. And every time you disobeyed, they put a little bit more water in the bucket. And I'll tell you, fam, after you hold up 30 gallons of water on each side in buckets out in the hot sun for 20 minutes, your arms are like spaghetti. You can't even bring a soda pop up to your mouth. And we had to duck walk out in the heat, which is where you get down and you grab your ankles and walk like a duck. One boy wet the bed, so they took him outside and threw the mattress outside, and the boy and hosed him off with the garden hose. I came back and my cat had passed away under dubious circumstances. I think my parents were just tired of my old cat. Had it put to sleep while I was at camp. came home and my stuffed animals were gone. My cat was gone. I had a stuffed animal, Pedro, and I adored Pedro. They threw him in the trash, you know. I didn't own that much stuff, but what I owned was nice. My father, after he did something hideous to you, would buy you a gift as his way of saying he was sorry. He bought me a electric pedal car, 1961 Lincoln Continental pedal car that ran off of 12 batteries. And it ran for 5 minutes and then died. And that was it. My parents couldn't afford more batteries. So the thing sat in the closet until it went to Goodwill. And in 1968, my father bought me this Magnavox 400 stereo record player. And it was expensive. It was about $250, which for my father would have been about a week and a half's pay to buy me this stereo for Christmas. And it was fascinating. You put a record on it and you turn the switch and the thing would come up and think about it, kind of like look at you, tap the record, back up a little bit, drop the record, come over, go down, play the record. It was fascinating to watch as the thing appeared to be thinking. And the front of it looked like a 68 Mercury Cougar, very modern, beautiful. And see, in my mind, I didn't realize the hurt that would cause the rest of the family, me getting such an extravagant gift for Christmas. And my brother got a carton of cigarettes and a crappy $35 GE record player. And you turn the GE on and it made this noise. Boop. And then it was very rigid how it dropped the record. And it came down and fell on it and had very crappy sound and a beat up gray gunmetal case, all for $35. And my brother was devastated. And why you would buy a 16-year-old boy a carton of cigarettes for Christmas, you know. The dysfunction of my family was incredible. We had all of these idols on the mantelpiece: Bast, Ra, Horus, Anubis, Buddha. We had the Black Mary mother and child reunion. And that's a scam, fam, in poor countries where people are so poor they can't afford anything. They got them talked into having a statue of Mary with a candle burning in front of it, carrying your prayers up to God. And the reason for that is they're squeezing the last few pennies out of that family by having them burn a candle 24 hours a day as their prayers go up before God. And it's like a candle tax. You take all of the families in a village burning candles, and you got yourself some money. But it's literally a poor people tax, and it does nothing to get your prayers heard by God. If anything, it's idolatry. So I'm surprised lightning didn't strike our house. Then my sister came. My father got born again. when he was 77, which is very unusual. He went from being my worst enemy and antagonist to being my best friend and buddy and pal and confidant. We never had a father-son relationship. It was like businessmen. And I would take him to Bish Thompson's or O'Donnell's or the Thunderbird, I think it was called, which was a Polynesian restaurant he loved. And he would tell me one of his poems that was going to change the world, you know. You're never closer to God than when you're in your garden. I was like, Buck, you're closer to God if you're buried in your garden. He was like, yeah, you smart aleck little. He didn't want to say the B word because that would be calling my mother a B word. So I'd say, come on, Buck, if you take that crap and cut it up and put it on your garden, man, you'll have watermelons the size of, watermelons the size of a basketball. Cut that crap up and spread it on your garden. So I had the privilege of being with him as he passed away. That was difficult, telling somebody who'd done all those things to me that I loved him, patting his hand, telling him, it's not going to hurt, Buck. It's just going to tingle. And then all of a sudden, you're going to be in glory. It's not going to hurt. I'm right here with you. I'll be right behind you. And when he passed, it was like angels came right through me through the window, collected him up, and for a split second, we were all together. It's the only way I can describe it. The angels and Buck and me, and then out the window. 11:38 p.m., I called my family. I said, it's me. Buck has passed. They said, thank you. Click. They didn't say, Will, the house is 2 blocks from the hospital. You just lost your father. Maybe you should come and stay at the house. It's not a good idea to drive. None of that. Thank you. Click. I opened up my Coca-Cola and my pack of cheese nips. That was my dinner. Stood there looking at Buck as he turned purple. He turned all blue and purple around the lips, and the life support was still puffing him up and ghastly. Sounded like Darth Vader. And when they put him on life support, the technician looked at my family and he took the hose and he bent it. And the machine went bleed, lead, 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 an alarm. And that was the technician's way of telling my family, don't you accidentally unplug this machine or accidentally step on the air hose or any of that. Don't you accidentally, And I felt bad for my father because my sisters didn't like the cats going through the house. The cats were going through the house, meow, meow, desperately looking for Buck. My sister hated those cats. So rather than taking them to the pound, she took them to the vet and had them both put down in their prime. One cat was very funny. His name was Musette, because I didn't know it was a boy. Very effeminate. And when Musette didn't like his food, he would come up to the dish and flop on his side and scratch next to the plate of food like he was scratching in a kitty litter box. And that was his way of saying he didn't like the food. Now, pumpkin I got from the dump when I was dumping the garbage truck. Pumpkin was on this pile of garbage with a bunch of other cats. And he ran up to the truck and hopped on the seat and got on top of the seat and just dared me to get him out of the truck. He looked at me. He started to go to sleep. He looked at me like, boy, man, I'm going to scratch. I will mess you up. I will scratch the crap out of you. I'll scratch you. Don't touch me. So I was like, yeah, I don't care. I dumped the truck, opened up the door. I said, look, man, I'm getting ready to go. Are you sure? I said, I'm closing the door. Once I close the door, and I expected him to freak out when I closed the door. I closed the door of the garbage truck, and he went to sleep on the top of the seat, arms folded. So I went to McDonald's and I got a spare hamburger. I said, you want some of this? He was like, give me that hamburger. And he made this meow, 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 and looked at me like, don't touch my food. I'll scratch you. I'll mess you up. He was a real tough cat. So I was like, I don't like this cat. I'll take him over to my father's. So I get back to the yard. I was like, time to go home. You gonna stay in the truck or you gonna go home? So I had a Mercury Cougar XR7. And he went from, no problem at all. He went from the garbage truck to the Mercury. And I dropped him off at my dad's house. I said, Buck, I got something for you. And the two demon spirits in the cat and my father, they were like peas in a pod, man. That cat took to my father like butter on bread. And it was a mean cat. It would bring something home and drag it under the bed and eat it. And my father heard this whimpering one day, and Pumpkin had caught a baby squirrel and was eating the squirrel under my dad's bed. But he was eating the squirrel from the bottom up, and the squirrel was whimpering and sucking its paw, trying to comfort itself as it was getting eaten alive. And my sister was like, you miserable. At that point, she had the cat in her gun sights for termination because she had to take the poor little squirrel and finish it off. It was half eaten alive. Horrible. Poor thing sitting there crying and sucking on its paw as the cat is nom-nomming on its legs and everything. So I miss my dad. My dad is in heaven. When I dream, he's like 30 years old, jet black hair, friendly. Got family and a lot of family and friends there now. Good grief. 2 sisters, 2 brother-in-laws. Well, the brother-in-laws, I kind of doubt whether they're there. Miss Pat from work, my uncle, my friend Verl, That was a shame about Verl. 60-year-old man goes to the gym and he weighs like 400 or 500 pounds. And they put him on a treadmill and literally they told him, oh, we'll monitor you and all. When he hit the ground, he was gone when he hit the ground. He had already DIED'd when he was standing up and hit the ground, gone. And they couldn't revive him. He was just gone. That to me is the stupidest thing. Take an old man who's overweight, put him on a treadmill, and then tell him to run, you know. I went to a doctor's one time and the doctor said, we're going to give you a stress test. And I said, no, you're not. No, you're not. I already know. He said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll revive you. No, you're not. You're not going to revive me because I'm not taking the stress test. I already know how finicky things are. And I've lasted years. That was like 15 years ago. And I run an EKG in my heart. I'm religious about taking my medicine, careful about what I eat. That's how you get to be old. So, and then that guy came up, snuck up behind me like a coward and punched me in the spine with every ounce of energy he had in his body. That was 6 years ago. This September 18th will be 6 years of me lying in this bed, looking at the ceiling, having to wear a diaper like a 2-year-old baby. And fam, if you want to help me out so I don't have to lie on paper shopping bags this month, Pop needs some more bed pads. They keep me from getting bed sores. And I go through a bunch of them because I leak like a 6-cylinder Chrysler 2.7 with a bad water pump on that engine, because I worked for Chrysler. Some genius got the idea to put the water pump on the inside of the motor, and they blame the customer for not taking care of it. Nothing could be further from the truth. To make the engine more cheaply and to survive higher revs, they use the water pump as what's called an idler pulley for the timing chain to go around. So it makes the engine shorter, more compact, cheaper to build. But then when the water pump fails, it's got a little weep hole going outside. It's supposed to start leaking the water outside, but invariably that little weep hole gets clogged with dirt. The water backs up into the oil and emulsifies the oil. So you pull the dipstick and you have oil and water that's twice as high on the dipstick, but then your cooling bottle will be empty. You take the cap off the engine, there will be gray oil and water all on top of the cap. That means you've got a blown water pump and a blown engine if you keep driving it that way. So you take it to the dealership, $1,500 later, you get a new water pump and timing chain, and you're good to go for another 50 or 60,000 miles. On that engine, you want to be religious. I mean religious about changing the oil. You want to use a synthetic oil. You want to be religious about keeping your coolant right. And you do not want to use a coolant flush or an engine flush. Anything that will aggravate the seal on that water pump inside the motor. But it's a great engine. It's a great engine till about 60 or 75,000, and it's called a grenade engine, which means it'll be great, and then all of a sudden, poof, gone. So you get 60, 75,000. You don't ever want to buy a 2.7 vehicle, whether it's a Charger or a van or anything. Chrysler 300, you don't ever want to buy a used one with the 2.7 unless it's been rebuilt. And fam, this business of a man going with you and he's going to show you how to buy a new car, a used car, and they won't fool him, and he gets in the car and revs the motor up and almost blows the motor by over revving it. That's the worst thing that you can do when you buy a used car. First thing you do when you buy a used car, you open up the hood with the engine cold. You look into the radiator, not the plastic bottle. Get a flashlight, look in the radiator. You're looking for oil floating on top of the coolant. So you don't see anything. The radiator and the bottle's fine. You pull the cold dipstick. You're looking for water and oil mixed. So the oil's clean, that's good. Then you go to the oil filler cap. You take that cap off while the motor's cold. Look under the cap. If it's got droplets of water and gray oil, you've got a bad motor. You've got a problem. You start the car up while it's cold. You go back to the exhaust pipe with a Kleenex or a white napkin. You hold it over the tailpipe. If there's a circle on the napkin and it's still white in the center, you're good to go. If it starts to get soot or blue smoke onto the handkerchief, you have a problem. Either the motor's out of tune or it's burning oil. Obviously, if the motor knocks, you have a problem. That's how people in the business tell whether the motor is good. Transmission is harder because most transmissions are sealed and you can't pull the dipstick to check on them. Only thing you can do is to take the transmission from park to reverse and then park to drive and then drive the car and see if the transmission clunks or hesitates or slips. The transmission is where you want to spend your extra money, and you don't do it with the dealership. You go to your local transmission shop and you ask them if you can get an extended warranty on your transmission, so if it fails, they can do the repair on it. So that's the cheapest way of taking care of the transmission. Then you carefully go over your electric windows up and down one by one. Check your lights, your flashers, your wipers, your air conditioning. When you turn on your air conditioning, you want to go to the evaporator, see if there are any bubbles that are going through the line. If there are bubbles, showing in the evaporator, the AC system needs to be recharged. Take a magnet and you go along the bottom of the car. If the magnet doesn't stick, the car has been wrecked and it has Bondo. You want to lift up the mats and check for flood damage. You want to get a Carfax to see if the car has been wrecked. Just take your time. do the same thing a dealer would do. Lift up the mat in the trunk, make sure the spare tire is there, you know, all of that stuff. And a lot of times, you know, people, because cars are so expensive, you know, they'll take reasonably good care of a car. The dealership will include the oil changes because they know they're getting the car back. So you have a reasonably good chance of getting a good car if you take your time. And you want to make sure the dealership has good reputation. I bought my last car at Academy Ford. It was a Ford Focus. Good little car, little bit of quirks. But the owner, Mr. Lynch, was the meanest, rudest person I'd ever dealt with. The service department people were wonderful, which kept me going back to Academy Ford. And I went to one of the Jiffy places for lube jobs. You always want to take a marker and mark your filter, mark your oil filter to make sure that they are replacing it instead of just wiping it off. A lot of shops, to save money and time and all, if they look at the history of the car and it's just had an oil change 3,000 miles ago, they'll take a rag and they'll wipe the filter off and make it look new. So you want to mark your filter or scratch it. You want to get out of the car, pull the dipstick. When I went to Jiffy Lube up in Elkridge, they always put 4 quarts of oil in the motor, and the book called for 4.5. We always argued back and forth. They said it didn't matter. I said, the book calls for 4.5. I paid for 5 quarts. I want my 4.5 quarts. I don't want the car to automatically be low on oil, as critical as it is. I've never had a problem with my motor. You don't trust anybody. You have to be your own manager. Now, I can say this and not get sued because it's the truth. When I bought my Cavalier, what Fox Chevrolet and Laurel did was very crafty. They put 2 buyer's orders on top of each other, and they gave me a black pen to sign the buyer's orders. So when I signed them, I thought I was signing copies. They told me to sign each page individually. I thought that should have set an alarm off in my mind, because I thought I was signing 6 copies of the same buyer's order. It wasn't. They had put a cheap buyer's order with an expensive buyer's order underneath of it and gave me a black pen. Told me to sign each page individually. Had I had a blue pen and signed the top and noticed that it didn't go through to the last 3, I would have noticed their trickery, that instead of 6 copies, they had put another buyer's order underneath the cheap one that called for a whole nother price, sales price of the car. So when I got home and I unpacked all of the paper a couple weeks later, I said, wait a minute, this is 2 different buyer's orders for the car. And after the interest and all, after paying $5,000 cash down, And you never want to go over 10,000 cash, because if you put 10,000 down, they're going to assume that you're a D dealer and they're going to call the feds on you. So you never put more than you don't want to put anything more than 10 down. You don't want to even put 10. You don't want to go over 9 and change put down on a car. I put 5 and ended up paying $31,000 for a 2004 brand new plain Jane Chevy Cavalier with no electric windows, no aluminum wheels, no spoiler, plastic hubcaps. I asked for a plain one because living in South Baltimore, I didn't want anything that would bring attention to itself and get jacked in the city. No high dollar sports wheels or any of that other crap. So you got to be smart to make it in the city. So I called a lawyer. The lawyer said, nope, you signed it. Nothing you can do, except I called a curse on the dealership. They went out of business. Now it's AutoNation. But I cursed them for their dishonesty. Just like these people at Golden Eagle Coins who have mistreated me lately. I didn't get my last batch of coins. I called up and I said, hey, your website says that the order is insured, and the lady stuck the phone in my ear, very nasty. Well, I tried to call back. She just hung up on me. So I'm like, okay, if I can't get it one way, I'll ask the good Lord to take care of it. He'll handle it. Whenever somebody does me wrong, I always pray for their soul's salvation, but I pray the prayer of Ezekiel when the boys made fun of Ezekiel and he cursed them and the bears came out of the woods and attacked the boys. If it's good enough for Ezekiel, it's good enough for me. So all you package thieves out there, you're like, wow, free stuff, stole Pop-Pop's package. And I asked God one time, there was a guy that was sticking these ill little quotes on telephones when I lived up in Montgomery Village. I prayed for like 3 months. I said, Lord, I want to run into this joker one day. I came into Giant and this guy asked me for a light. And so when he pulled the pack of cigarettes out, a few of these little cards that he was putting on telephones fell out. And I said, you're the phone booth guy. Yup. I said, I asked the good Lord 3 months ago to make a way for me to run into you. So if you mess somebody over, fam, and you come up against a child of the one true living God, there's no hiding. Anywhere in the world, we can reach out and grab you. Now, we still have to do it. We have to do it in truth and righteously and all that. Because the word says good and bad wine doesn't pour out of the same bottle. But I'll tell you what, if the person is foul and you pray for their soul's salvation, they're going to go through the same trials and hardship that you went through to come to soul salvation. So that's not necessarily an easy prayer to pray for somebody, you know. I know people nowadays say, well, you just say a few words and you're good to go. Then you go right back to using your mouth for a sewer for somebody else, or you go right back out to making kids and then having them scraped out of your belly like seeds out of a pumpkin. And ladies, I'm not judging anybody. I know the type of guys that tell a woman, "Oh, come on, baby, I'm your man, and let's not use birth control because I'll always be there for you." And then when you turn up pregnant, he says, "Well, you need to go handle your business," while he takes your car and you're still at work pregnant and he's using your car to go see another girl. I knew a guy who made 32 babies up and down the East Coast. 32. And he was proud of all the women that he had ruined and spoiled, as he put it. And karma caught up with him. He worked on a garbage truck and he took a $50 bribe to dump these barrels of chemicals that he should have had nothing to do with. And like a dumbass, he packed them. And when he packed them in the truck, the chemicals squirted on the exhaust pipe of the truck and blew the truck to bits and set the guy on fire. So he's probably still burning in hell to this day. I just remembered how he said how it was a particular joy for him to spoil white women, was exactly the way he put it, to ruin the white man's daughter, you know, for the most part. So, and I know there are a lot of mixed race couples out there that love each other. I dated an African American girl when I was in high school. We were not allowed to go to the prom together. You figure Glen Echo Park, where we went to the amusement park, was segregated all the way up to 1968. So this stuff isn't that long ago. And people say, well, let's just forget about it and all. No, the hurts and all of that other stuff is still fresh in the memories of a lot of people. I remember people of color who rode the trolley from Washington and they couldn't get off at Glen Echo. Couldn't even get off because they were people of color. And then Vince, what's his name, the newsman, did an article shaming Glen Echo. And rather than integrate the park, they shut it down because all of a sudden it became a problem. Now, I did go into the bathroom shortly after integration, and 7 young men shook me down for my money. And the guy grabbed my hand and shook it. And at that point, I decided I would never, ever let somebody do that to me again, do something wrong and then shake my hand. I was in court one time getting sued by my sister's employer, my sister-in-law's employer, because he had taken my case as a doctor on complete benefits, which means that you don't make a co-payment. The doctor accepts complete benefits from the insurance company, and that's that. So after my sister-in-law dumped all of his bills down the trash chute and walked out on the guy, he decided to sue me. So I explained to his lawyer. The lawyer went to shake my hand. I said, why should I shake your hand and you dragged me into court and I'm innocent? I said, this is what happened. My sister-in-law, I don't know whether she did it on purpose, but instead of putting the bills down the mail chute, she dumped all of the doctor's monthly bills down the trash chute. And he went a month without getting paid until he figured out what had happened. She got fired and I got sued. And the lawyer went up to the judge and he called for the case to be dismissed. But these guys at Glen Echo, when I was in the bathroom, I was like, oh crap, there's seven young stallions in there, took my money, grabbed my hand, shook it and said, nice doing business with you. So that was the last time I went to Glen Echo. They shut it down because they said the park had become a problem. So I dated a beautiful African-American girl who sang opera. She had a beautiful voice. This was 1971. We were not allowed to go to the prom together. They picked this whiny little white girl for me to go with. She had a Kleenex up to her runny red nose the whole time. And as a matter of fact, they didn't have the white couples and the black couples dance together either. At the prom, it was all white couples on the dance floor. And my girlfriend was with a black guy. Very painful. We never got together. We never got together after that. Never got together. I dated other African-American girls. One was in the Army. Her name was Debbie. Very beautiful, physically fit. I made the mistake of taking her to my full gospel church. And this girl at the church who fancied me burst into tears. And at that point in the eyes of those church people, I was damaged goods, I can tell you. I got shunned in every manner you can get shunned. People at the church that used my trash company quit and got different trash companies. You know, all that stuff. So I've been through the fire. I had another African-American girlfriend who looked like a young Cicely Tyson. And in any case, I had my brother's newborn baby. And I took my girlfriend to the hot shops. We were sitting there minding our own business. And this man came over to my nephew, held onto his head, and rubbed his head really hard. And everybody was like, isn't that cute? Well, when I got to my parents to put the baby down for a nap, I told my mother. She was horrified. She said the man was sending you a message. He was saying rub an N-word's head for good luck, was what the man was telling you. He was rubbing the baby's head for good luck. So all of this civility is very thinly veiled. And now, thanks to Norman Lear, who cast white people as Archie Bunker thieves and pigheads and stooges, the pendulum has swung back the other way. And now you have companies like Mattress Firm, where the white person in the commercial is the obnoxious antagonist. Everybody else is behaving themselves. The white person is cutting people off in traffic and putting their smelly foot in people's laps on airplanes and yelling at little children during basketball games. Always the white person is the antagonist now. That was courtesy of Norman Lear, you know, where everybody else is a saint except the white person now. I don't have a problem with that, except that my doctrine is fairness. It should be fairness. When I worked at Dodge, I had a customer who worked in the government. He was an engineer. And in any case, middle-aged white man, he said the only way he could work in his field was he had to do his work and then hand it off to a lady of color who was his supervisor, and she would take his work, put her name on it, and pass it forward. I went through that when I went through the trucking company in Washington, and I was one of 3 Caucasians. And the boss that I worked for was a young Hispanic guy that had come to America in the back of a tractor trailer in 90-degree heat. He said people were urinating in the corner and going to the bathroom in the corner, and men were getting with men, and men were getting with women, and they decided that since they were coming to the end of their lives, they were just going to do the freaky deek in this tractor trailer that they were locked in. And he survived. And he was a hard-working dude. He was 28 years old. I, at the time, was like 50. So had to answer to him. I didn't have a problem at all, except for the fact that his boss, who was like 40-ish, came down to the dispatch office, and the dispatcher and I had written a program for the computer, and all the company had to do was put in the truck times and the times of the men and all, press a button, and it would figure out for you whether you were making money or losing money off of a particular driver, if he was inefficient or whether he was damaging his truck, that kind of thing. So the boss came down, loaded the program, took it back to his computer upstairs, expanded it a little bit, colorized it with pretty little colors, put his name on it, and took credit for it. So the other dispatcher and I, we were like, wow. Guy never mentioned where he got it from or anything, you know. And the company had a Shark Tank, which was a clear conference room. And you could see people, because my boss told me come up front and cover for reception. So I got cleaned up and put on a suit and tie. I'm sitting at reception, and when the door opens, you hear screaming and yelling and crying. Then the door closes, and you can see the people back and forth yelling and arguing and all that. I'm sitting at reception like, what have I gotten myself into? People coming out, slamming the door, screaming. So one day they called me into the Shark Tank 2 weeks before Christmas, And boss man said this girl at the company said she had priority over me for my job. She wanted the job and the company car. 2 weeks before Christmas, out of a job. So I said, okay. I said, I'll return the car and, we'll part company. The boss actually looked furious that I didn't cry or get upset. So I took his car to Fox Chevy in Laurel. I told him to put new run flat tires on it, the Uniroyal run flat tires, because garbage yards have nails. And I told him put new brakes on it, detail it, return it to the garbage company. Then I bought a new Chevy Cavalier. I bought it in the company colors of the other company I was going to fake the people out there so that they would think that it was a supervisor's car. That way I could park it with the other supervisors, not say anything to anybody, let them assume. So that's what I did. When the other old car went down to the trucking company, the girl noticed some cookie crumbs around the shifter that the detailer had missed. She went inside and railed on the owner that the car wasn't suitable for her. So he said, fine, I'll give you $50 a week. You drive your own vehicle. They parked the Malibu around back, and a truck backed over it, crunched it into a little tin can. The men told me, they said, well, God doesn't love ugly. So I returned the car in new condition. I had all my uniforms professionally cleaned, wrapped in plastic, put on the conference room table. After a while, they fired the girl and hired me back. So, and the one girl in the office was really nasty. She badgered this one girl who was lovely, Darlene, badgered her, and the girl finally had had enough of it. She went home and took sleeping pills, slid under the water in her bathtub, and that was that. I told this one girl, I said, well, Holly, Darlene said that you were her main antagonist while she was here, and you're going to her funeral. That makes no sense. I was her best friend, but being Caucasian, I was not invited to the funeral, And the girl was lovely. The mistake she made was she was in accounts receivable, and instead of collecting the money by the most amount due, for example, Mr. Brown owed the company $50. She went alphabetically instead of going after Mr. Zachariah, who owed the company $50,000. So the company money dried up because she wasn't getting the money in the door fast enough. And so this girl ratted her out, and she offed herself. Another girl, cold as ice, was the girl Friday to the boss. And she decided she wanted to be a prison guard because locking people up and keeping them under her thumb was a big turn on for this girl. Just mean and the eyes of a shark. And that's the way it was with people from the Shark Tank, And my boss knew about it. He was a nice guy, but he hired people that he knew could do the dirty work for him. And one day they had me come in 8 o'clock in the morning. They handed me a shovel and told me to go scrape garbage truck dirt out of the clean out bay till 4:30 in the afternoon on this blistering hot day. And I was old then. I was 55. And the men came up and they said, well, he wants you either to quit or he wants to kill you. And they didn't play around because they had another guy who wanted to start a union. This was according to the drivers. I heard this through the drivers. And they told the man to go up inside a recycling truck on a hot day and adjust the papers so that they could load the truck a little bit more. When he went up there, they closed the truck down on him. And between the heat and getting compressed for 5 minutes by the truck, they opened the truck up magically and he had had a heart attack, gone. So that was the end of their problem that wanted to start a union. So I knew these people didn't play. And when I left, I was like, hey, we're parting company. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, because I don't want to wind up in the back of a garbage truck packed into a whole bunch of dirty diapers and Starbucks cups. So when I worked for the mob, it was that way. When I worked for mob-owned trash companies, they were just like that. They could be very congenial and friendly and give you a nice company car or a TV set or furniture, as a reward. But man, if they thought you crossed them, and I had to leave a state one time when a contract was put on me. And I left at 11 o'clock at night. I found out that a contract was out on me. And I won't go into the details. I was hired as a salesman for a trash company. And the lady and I did too good of a job. It caused the other company to collapse. So they put a contract out on me. When I found out, I returned my company car 11 o'clock at night, shaking, approaching the company in my Datsun 280ZX T-top with red leather. With my nephew in the car, he was picking up on something wrong. He threw up all over the car. And I had my very expensive electric razor in the car. I pull up to the yard, and the two companies had been fighting. Some of our trucks had accidentally caught fire at night, so they hired a security guard. And the guy came up to me, and I said, nice night. Threw the keys in the car, locked the car. My sister-in-law pulled up in a van. I had all my furniture and my dog in the back. I could hear the dog. Every time she put on the brakes, the dog would go, ah. So I had my dog, my sister-in-law, my nephew. She pulled up with the lights turned off. I dove into the van, looked at her. I said, drive, drive. And man, she took off. I heard the dog in the back. Oh, he had these cute little ears. and he would turn them like Radar. That was his name, was Radar. Oh. So she drove out to the highway with the lights turned off, just the orange marker lights, got on the highway, pulled the headlights on. And man, when I came across the bridge back into my state, I was never more glad. And then the guy had a heart attack who put the contract out on me, and I was relieved. I was very relieved. Not that he had a heart attack, but that he wasn't gonna get me. And it wasn't that much money. It was only a couple $1,000, but back then, 1980, whatever, $2,000 was a whole lot more money than it is now. And there were farm boys and country boys out there that $2,000 would have been, had them good to go for half a year or more. So, because there wasn't anything but used car dealers and chicken farms. And old Frank Perdue, when I was out there, he got impatient in traffic. He decided to pull into the oncoming lane and then swing back into traffic. And before he could make it, a lady came over the hill, hit his Mercedes head on, wiped her out, and they paid the lady's family some piddling amount of money, like $10,000, to forget about everything. But he was another person who didn't play. And he built his plant a couple feet outside of the town limits so he wouldn't have to pay taxes. And man, when that chicken plant ran, the town water tasted like chicken blood and would turn your stomach. Everything was an old boy system down there. The men looked at my sister-in-law and I. We walked into the diner, and it was no women allowed in the morning. My sister-in-law got out of a Corvair convertible with a black leather jacket and a scarf, and they instantly branded her a WHORE and branded me along with her. And that was very difficult because you drive into town for gas and they'd fill the car up in front of you, and when they got to your car, they were out of gas. So you had to go into another city to buy gas and stuff. And remember not to run out in your own town. So it was like going back into the 1940s with racism and all that other stuff. Racism and sexism. I was very glad to get home. Speaking of home, fam, it's like 12:30 at night. I gotta go. I just wanted to talk to y'all. I get lonely. My mano derecha, man Raj, has taken a dump on me again. He's in one of his moods. So a whole lot of unpleasant things happened this month. Getting my mail stolen and packages stolen. See, now people think when they steal something, it's no big deal. They don't know about the eternal consequences. Because it says thieves don't enter the kingdom of heaven. So one of the packages had my adult pads in it. So I'm a little bit short on them. If any of you want to go to my Amazon link, I really could use a package of bed pads. And my link is real deal. I don't have stereos and earbuds and stuff like that. On my Amazon link, I have my bed pads, diapers. You know, sometimes I'll have Motrin on there. Necessities, nothing frivolous. So I'm going to go. I have my PayPal link. And if you want to contribute to a charity in my name, you can go to Meals on Wheels of Central Maryland Donate. Meals on Wheels is a wonderful charity. They keep elderly, handicapped people fed, and they also shuttle the handicapped people around. They do a wonderful job. They're nice, dedicated people. As far as I know, pretty much everything that they get, they spend back on people. It's not one of these charities where the CEO is getting $1 million income. So I love y'all. I care about y'all. Poppity Pops out.